Ventus aves tacverunt, augur non argo, an exaudiant, mitre o, me auxilium confere, tenebre valata pugnare malis. Tauri sanguine est vita, ut scorpionum morsus, hec est quam spelunca, et canem et angvem, hunc plausus in spelunca occulta, ex luce et umbra, cum diabolis antrum.
We have to go back in history to about 700 BC, when by the banks of the river Tiber in Italy was a community lived in by some people called the Latins. They were surrounded by other tribes who were quite warlike, so they embarked on defending their territory. And over a period of probably 200 years, they took over most of central and southern Italy. Other periods followed, and by the end of the 1st century, they'd taken over most of Europe. The Mediterranean lands, Greece, Spain, the islands of the Mediterranean, Turkey, and France as well. And then they turned their attention to us.
Memineris hiberno venit per secula, commensationibus, potationibus, natura sanguinem.
What didn't they give us? There's so many things that they left behind. Our form of government, our legal system, our calendar, our language, our structured ways of building. Now, other things that they gave us, the road system. It's said that in the first 100 years they were here, they constructed between 8,000 and 10,000 miles of roadway. And we still use over 3,000 miles of the roads that they laid out today, even central heating. But I think their greatest legacy must have been to unify the country, to show us that people could live together. And they had the longest period of peace that we've ever had in this country. They established their rule with law and order. It was a tremendous bonus.
Sumus ex Hispania legio Marti superbus et fortis, victrices, rapinis, edificare cum unuquisque ad pugnam, amicitia, amissis, cui mulier imperat, et lucratus est. Milaria et milium passum iter nos in estete meridiem, et gladius ex utraque parte acutus, suscitavit scuta, et clamor belli, respondet eidie ac nocte.
Buxton in Roman times was called Aqua Artemisia, which translated means goddess of the sacred grove. And when the Romans got to Buxton, they've discovered that she was worshipped by the locals, and therefore they adopted the Artemisia part of the name and kept the aqua in front of it, as at Aqua Silis in Bath, which is in exactly the same situation.
Per ululatus ventis et pluvis persecutionem passe, et nos erant per vin omnipotentem, pinxit et redhets, circumvecti ab hostibus, maleficis aquilonis victoria maledixit Deus, donec finiantur lux nostri, non tamen de flama ignis, ubi tu Mars, Martem, solus ego videre Saturnus ipse potestate sua.
Oh yes, it's thought that there were a number of attractions, and the hippodrome was probably based on a circular path that is exactly 400 metres long, and that circular path is underneath the Pavilion Arts Centre, which was originally called the Hippodrome Theatre. So there's good evidence to suggest that the Romans and the Celts did horse racing in that area, and possibly chariot racing also on a loose surface track. Yes, there are two temples probably within the gardens area. The first one is in the form of a spiral and is probably a Celtic temple, and that was first recorded by visitors to Buxton in Elizabeth I era, and then reinforced by other visitors to Buxton during the Georgian period, when they also found a spiral temple which couldn't be explained in terms of the actual gardens. The second temple in the gardens was clearly marked as being to the goddess Epona, and the base of that temple is still surviving as an octagon, and it's pretty much certain that before people went to the hippodrome, to the races, they probably prayed at the temple of Epona to wish them luck and good fortune in the actual races themselves. So there are two more or less definite temples.
Sentit inertes et sine manu mea, scutum aut gladium advendum servire, et timit me, et admirabilis fieri non suscitavit, hi autem cum tam pulchra mihi vestibus.
Wirksworth, if we are correct about the archaeology, was a provincial capital, which means it's quite an important place. It would be the centre of the local government, it was a centre of the lead trade, and it had the Roman court that looked after the lead trade, which later developed into a thing called the Bar-Moat Court. The Bar-Moat Court is still operating, and it's the oldest operating industrial court in the country. And in addition to that, Wirksworth would also have provided a market for goods and services and things that people needed. So it had quite a wide-ranging role and quite an important role in the Peak District at the time. The evidence for identifying Lutedarum is quite difficult. If you were to be absolutely certain, what you would need to find would be a milestone about a mile out of Wirksworth that said Lutedarum this way. And consequently proving that Wirksworth is Lutedarum is relatively difficult. But the way that we have attempted to address it is by looking at the Roman road network around this part of the Peak District to see if it was centred on a particular location. And gradually we're building up a picture of how the Roman road network links to Wirksworth and what it does. And then secondly, we're looking around Wirksworth itself at the kind of archaeology we might find in Wirksworth. But this is a relatively difficult process because Wirksworth is a small town, nobody's building big superstores or anything in Wirksworth, which would lead to sort of developmental archaeology. And to give an example of that, they didn't find the Roman fort in Chesterfield until about 30 years ago, and they found it because they were building a Woolworths. So unless somebody builds a Tesco's in the middle of Wirksworth and digs a vast great hole, we're unlikely to get the kind of developmental archaeology that you might get in other towns. So that restricts us to digging holes in people's gardens and open areas, and that's relatively difficult and a slow process. I think that Wirksworth and its district was important chiefly because it was a major lead mining area. And lead, like other minerals and metals, was very valuable to the Romans. It was much more easily obtainable around Wirksworth than it was in other parts of the Roman Empire. They could also find lead in places like Spain, but it was relatively difficult to extract. Whereas in Britain there were several lead fields, including the one around Wirksworth. There was one in the Mendips, there was one in Flintshire, there was one around Pateley Bridge in Yorkshire, so they could extract the lead relatively easily. Well, insofar as digging up lead with a pickaxe, you know, it's not that easy. And lead was used for many, many things, but the one that often springs to people's mind is things like plumbing.
Innocens campum villa abesse, donec vehicula equum ducatur, ita sonantis et fetida. Martia senum frustra finis enim est propinquus, donec iterum lucem video.
Quite early, round about AD 60, AD 70, on Strutt's Park is the first fort. So Derby was settled quite early, probably because the Romans knew of Derby and Derbyshire for the lead. Before the Romans came, that's the Claudian expedition, when Claudius took Britain. Before that, even when Caesar came, they'd come because they were trading with Britain. They were having corn and they were having lead and tin. So they knew where they were going anyway. So they arrived in Derby very early. Well, Derby didn't exist. Derby is a Viking name, but you can tell by the by ending. But the first part of it gives the clue, Dar or Der, which is the river. The Romans named places after the names the locals gave it, and then added their own. They Latinised it. Well, not Romanised it, I should say. So it would have been either Deventium or Debentium, with a V or a B. And that would have been the same name wherever they were, either side of the river. Oh, well, we know of two for certain. Strutt's Park was the first fort. Evidence has been found of Romanised items, Romano-British buildings have been found on that area, or the foundations of such, and we know of Little Chester, so two forts certainly. Although there's a gap of about 70 years between the Strutt's Fort disappearing, or the Strutt's Park Fort, and Little Chester appearing. So whether they went somewhere else or whether they were happy with the location and the fort was built for some other reason at Little Chester, we don't really know. But we know that there was two sites. I think the main thing is that we don't make enough of our history. That Derby has probably as much Roman history and Roman sites as any town. Leicester, who have recently been doing work to improve the town, that have brought their Roman stuff to life. You can go and see it. There's plenty of places all around the country where the actual Roman features have been made into a feature. Derby, for some reason, its history is not forgotten but not celebrated. And I would like to see more made of what is at least 2,000 years of history. And of course, if you go up into the Shire, we've got Neolithic and Mesolithic and all sorts of stuff. Stone circles, the second best henge in the country at Arborough. The only other Saxon helmet found in the country was found in Derbyshire at Pentigrange. So yeah, we don't make enough of what we've got, and it's a fantastic story.